everyone, and thanks for joining us for Education 101. This is a special back-to-school edition of this program, and I'm Carol Birdsong, Communications Director for Williamson County Schools. And with me today, Tim Gaddis, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment for Williamson County Schools. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, Carol.
We're getting ready for back-to-school time. Lots going on in your department, for sure.
We are. It's approaching quickly, and we have a lot going on. You're right.
You do. Now, for folks who do not know you, even though you're a Williamson County and been around a long time, you're still, I would say, fairly new to Williamson County, under 5 years. So talk about your background in education as we get started.
Well, sure. Now, I have to say, Williamson County Schools feels like home for me now, even though I haven't been here a long time. This is I've just finished my second year with the district. I started my teaching career in Indiana and taught for many years. I'm an old English teacher. And then came to Tennessee, worked with some nonprofit organizations, working with schools around the country. And then eventually went to the State Department of Ed and worked there with our principals across the state. And then I had the good fortune to get to join the Williamson County family.
And we are glad to have you. And you have a wonderful department. Teaching, learning, and assessment encompasses so much that actually we've already talked. We need to have yet another program just to talk about all the different elements in your department. But we're going to focus today on what some folks out in the community across the nation and right here in Williamson County Schools have heard about, and that's called Common Core or Common Core standards and such. And Common Core has been around quite some time, but first of all, we'll talk about that, but tell us what Common Core standards are. We always hear of this kind of standard or that kind of standard or whatever, but what's Common Core?
Well, Tennessee, as with all of the other states in the nation, have had academic standards for a long time that are set by the state. And the Common Core standards are the new set of standards that Tennessee is sharing with 44 other states. This particular set of standards will be focused on reading and language arts and mathematics. It really, this set of standards allows some shared understanding of the proficiencies and the skills that students ought to have in those two subject areas. And Tennessee is one of the adopters, and we will be fully implementing here soon.
So what is a standard, honestly, for a parent who's out watching or someone whose children have been through schools? What's a standard?
The best way to understand that is just to say it's what the student needs to know or be able to do.
Okay.
It is important to understand that standards sometimes are confused with curriculum. And the Common Core standards are not a curriculum. Curriculum is still something that is set at the local level. Here in Williamson County, we set our own curriculum, and folks are able to find that on our website, actually, with our scope and sequence. So it's not a curriculum, and it's also not a set of materials, not a set of titles that students are reading. It really does go back to the skills that a student needs to be able to demonstrate.
So give me an example, if you don't mind, of a standard. 2 + 2 = 4 at a certain grade level?
That would certainly be a content. I'm going to go to English, though, because remember, I'm an old English teacher.
I shouldn't have thrown that math at you. Yeah.
But if one standard may very well be that a student is able to read a passage and read that passage closely and is able to respond to an opinion question, but here's the part that's in the standard. Not only does the student respond to that opinion question, but is able to cite evidence from the text that would support that opinion. And that's a really important critical skill that the Common Core standards includes one of the real focus areas. So that's the kind of thing. So you could do that within the context of any number of titles or any number of subject areas. The standard is really the skill itself.
Okay. And you said reading for Common Core, it's reading, language arts, and math.
Reading, language arts, and math. Now, I will say that doesn't leave everyone else out, however, because the Common Core standards are actually divided into, there's the part that is specifically about reading and language arts. part that's specifically about math. Then there's a third sort of section to this thing, and it is literacy within the content areas.
Oh.
And so it's literacy within the context of social
Science?
studies or science or technical subjects. In each of those subjects, close reading, careful reading and understanding text and really being able to analyze that text is an important skill. If you're reading a social studies text, for instance, you're going to be looking at different viewpoints, you're going to have to be able to analyze facts and opinions. You've got to be able to do that, and that's a big part of Common Core.
Okay, all right. So, where did these standards come from? They didn't just all of a sudden appear this year, although we're hearing more about it.
You're right. They've been around really for several years now, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of a history lesson. I'll go back to 2007, actually, so go back several years. And many folks in the audience probably remember that at that time the U.S. Chamber of Commerce made a lot of headlines by giving Tennessee an F for truth in advertising with its academic standards. And what they were getting at there was that our students in Tennessee were demonstrating proficiency at really high levels of our academic standards. And yet, when you looked at national measures like the NAEP and other kinds of tests like that, our students were not doing very well. And they were saying, you know, this is a clear indicator that our standards were, quite frankly, too easy. So in Tennessee, in that same year, in 2007, Tennessee really began work on kind of upping the level of rigor for our students. And so we had the Tennessee Diploma Project that was a part of that helped to raise those standards. And at the same time, it turns out that there were 16 other states who were working on the exact same problem. And so in 2008, the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers began to work on this, and they were the ones who began the project of the Common Core standards and began that work. Tennessee then in 2009 joined the effort. And in 2010, our State Board of Education formally adopted the Common Core standards. And both Governor Bredesen and Governor Haslam have both been on the Board of Directors for Achieve, which has developed a good part of those standards.
Okay. So when did, if the State Board adopted in 2010, when did we start working with that in Williamson County schools?
We, in 2011, it would have been in the summer of 2011, our kindergarten through second grade teachers began to get professional development in both math and in reading for those standards. And really we focused on math first, in large part because that was an area in all Tennessee schools where we lag reading a little bit. So that was when it got started. And then we've had every summer since then, there have been large state trainings. In fact, even today, there are hundreds of folks getting training at Summit High School in Common Core.
In math or?
It's a combination. They're doing some math and also some reading, and we have folks from across subject areas who are getting a lot of training. What has happened is the work began with kindergarten through 2, and it has worked up toward the high school.
Okay.
And with that work beginning in 2011, in 2014-15, will be fully implemented so that across the state, all districts, including Williamson County, will be held accountable for the Common Core standards.
And that's K-12?
K-12. K-12.
Okay.
Now, it's important to understand that we have the Common Core standards in those areas that I mentioned earlier. We'll still have social studies standards that are not a part of Common Core. They're our state standards. We'll still have science standards. And then in all those other subject areas, the technical areas, art, music, all of those kinds of areas, we'll still have standards. It's just that these standards will sort of take the place of our current language arts and math standards.
Okay. I'm going to go back to some, educators are the worst about throwing out terms and we use jargon and various things. For our parents who are viewing out there, they hear the term Common Core Standards, and then they hear scope and sequence, which is a near and dear to our heart project that we've worked on in Williamson County Schools over the past several years. Just if you would explain the difference between those two.
Certainly. The standards are simply one part of a scope and sequence. The scope and sequence, just and again, to get away from the jargon, really is a shared understanding of the content. What is it that we're going to cover? What is it we're going to be working on with students? That's sort of the scope part of that. Right. And the sequence is the order, as you would guess. So it really is that shared understanding of what is it that we want to make sure that we're focusing on, and what's the most logical order that we can build deep conceptual understanding. So that's what we have. And actually on our website, if folks will go to instructional services and just click right there, they'll see the scope and sequence. They can see every course at every grade level.
That might be a back to school thing that parents want to do. If
Absolutely.
They have a third grader getting ready to start third grade and they want to go see what's going to be covered in math that year, you can go, it's all laid out for you.
Absolutely. And it's divided into a 3-column format, and on that left-hand column, those are the standards. And that column will include not only Common Core standards, but also the TCAP type standards that we're currently responsible for. So they can see those on the left side. It's the middle column that is most important, and it is a series of I can statements. And those I can statements are intended not only for students, but also for their parents and for teachers and for everyone. They take all the jargon out. They're very specific. Good. They start with a STEM, I can, and they name the skill very specifically there. And then over in that other column, we have the resources that teachers are using, and parents can access those resources as well.
That's really a wonderful tool. And I have to say, your department worked, and teachers in this county all work together to create that scope and sequence guide.
It was a huge effort by a lot of really dedicated folks, and I can't say enough about the teachers who spent countless hours working on that. I will tell you that it is, because it's on our website, it has become a model that we're hearing that districts from around the country are using it as a resource, including a number of districts here in Tennessee who have contacted us asking for permission.
And that's nice that they ask for permission instead of just.
That's right. We posted it though. They can use it if they want.
And you know what? It's good
for
work.
The greater good.
It is. It's all about kids, no matter where they are. All right, let's get back to Common Core. Sorry, I venture off in different directions. But so, what kind of changes will Common Core require?
Well, I think the big change, or one of the big changes that folks will notice if they are looking at that scope and sequence, or if they've been aware of our standards in the past, is that there are fewer standards. The standards themselves, they really do seek to build deeper conceptual understanding, and not just these huge numbers of things that we have to make sure that we cover every single year. So I think what they'll find is they're fewer and deeper, and that goes across the board with the Common Core standards. There are some specific things, however. I think in math in particular, there will be a real focus on building deep understanding and connecting ideas, and making sure that there is a coherent kind of process to building math understanding. And there will be a focus or a shift more toward understanding, and a move away from simply knowing the algorithms that go along with math. I always use the example, I know that I learned at some point, probably in middle school, long time ago, that if I want to divide fractions, well, I'm gonna invert and multiply. Now, to this day, I have no idea why I'd want to do such a thing, but I know that that's the way you do it. But what that causes is, for me personally, I probably can't apply some of that principle in lots of applications. I know one way to do that. Our students are going to really be focusing on the underlying mathematical concepts that go with that, and consequently can apply them to more complex problems than I would be able to do.
Kind of a why thing. They'll,
Yeah.
they'll understand why they're doing
really
it, so they
is.
can use it other ways.
In reading and language arts, there are really the big changes there will be that there will be more focus on complex texts. We know that when our students leave us and they get to to the college level, or even if they go into the workforce and they're dealing with technical manuals and so forth, those texts are on pretty high levels in terms of complexity. And we need to make sure that the kinds of texts that we're using with our students would reflect that level of complexity, so that they're used to and certainly able to deal with that level of text. So it's going to be more complex text, and we're going to add increasing emphasis to nonfiction. Now that's not to say, and I know sometimes folks worry about this.
They want to read. They want to read for enjoyment. Yes.
We are still all of the kind of standard titles that are in the literary canon that students have been reading for a long time in high school literature classes or middle school literature classes. They're still reading. They're still there, and you can look at our scope and sequence and find those titles. Yes. But we really are emphasizing that nonfiction text much more heavily than we have in the past. I'm going to add just a little more, and then, the other thing that we're going to be focusing on in terms of reading is what's called close reading. And, we, in the past, sometimes we have really focused on reading rate almost to the exclusion of some of the other kinds of elements of reading. But as you know, when we have something that's kind of a tough text, we have to do something it's slower, it's deeper. We reread, we ask questions, we may make notations. There are all kinds of things that we have to do in our lives with our reading, and we're going to be focusing more on that, because those are skills that students have to have in college and in the workplace. And then finally, across the board, students are going to be writing more, and parents are going to see it.
Oh, okay.
What
what will that look like at home?
Well,
Different at grade levels,
parents may be surprised when they are, kind of at the kitchen table and they're looking over the shoulder, and their child is working on math homework, and they're writing a paragraph, or maybe about the math problem itself. They may not expect that, but what we know is that it's important that students be able to express the approach that they took, look at alternative approaches and so forth, and they do that in words. And so it may be in a math class. It may be that they'll find that in a science class or in a social studies class, they're doing more writing. They have more homework that is focusing on putting those ideas together.
Now, we kind of really talked about the implementation and where we are now. Is there anything you wanted to add on timeline? You've kind of shared that.
Well, I think a part of the timeline, we can't really look at this overall timeline without looking at, well, at what point, what's the end point? When will our students and our schools and teachers and principals be held accountable? So that's a part of that.
Okay.
And so, as I said, in 2014-15, we will be fully implementing the Common Core. It's also in 2014-15 that we will be implementing a new assessment. Now it's called the PARC assessment.
But it's not spelled P-A-R-K.
No, it's PARCC, and it's one of those long names that I understand why they decided to call it by its acronym. But it's the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Career.
Okay.
So it makes
PARC.
sense, but nobody's going to remember that. But so the PARC assessment is what will be used in both language arts and in math. And Tennessee is part of actually a 22 state consortium that is involved in the development of the PARCC test. And the PARCC test will be aligned directly to the Common Core standards. Right. Now, so in 14-15, our students will take the PARCC assessment, but they will also, remember, they'll still have a social studies assessment that's a state one. It's our TCAP, or end of course at the high school. So they'll have that for the social studies and science, just as they do now.
But PARCC
will take the place of our language arts and our math.
Now, with PARCC, you said there are 22 states working together. So they'll all take the same assessment. So we'll be able to compare our students to others?
Absolutely. Among those 22 states, there's another consortium another, I think 26 of the states, something like that, are involved in. And so they're also developing a test. And these two tests are going to be very similar. But we are going to be able to look across the nation. And so, perennially, Massachusetts is always held up as having high test scores and strong achievement and, one of the best states in the nation. Our Tennessee students will be able to compare themselves, or we'll be comparing our performance across the nation. That's right.
Really,
never.
Other than very limited with ACT. There are 9 states that test their entire graduating classes like we do, like Tennessee does. That's really the only one.
And even then, there are huge variations in terms of the numbers of times that students take the ACT and so forth. Here we're going to have some data that we can look at, and now I don't think the most valuable part of this is comparison at all.
I know, but parents will want to know that.
But it is something that it's one of the sort of the side effects, I guess, that we'll have.
Sure.
I think what the PARCC test will allow, though, is for a better picture of where students are in terms of mastering those skills and those proficiencies, because the PARCC testing will allow for more extended responses. So they won't be just a series of bubbled multiple choice as we have now.
Right.
Extended responses will be a part of that. The other thing that's sort of remarkable about the PARCC test is that the PARCC testing will all be online, 100% online. And what that allows students to do is interact with the test in a different way, so that it may be, for instance, in a math question, or maybe a geometry focused question, that a student is actually doing some dragging and dropping to help solve a problem, and they can do that right on the test.
Will our students be prepared to take a test like that?
Well, we're working hard at that, and certainly one of the things that we're doing that is helping our students get closer to that is our BYOT initiative. We are working hard to make sure that our students have an opportunity for technology to be a part of their instructional and their assessment lives at school. And that's whether they're bringing their own or whether they're using our school devices. We want to make sure that they do have those kinds of opportunities. And so we're working hard at that.
Is that K-12 for the computer assessment?
Well, it is. Now remember, the PARCC assessment will begin with third grade.
Just like TCAP. So nothing changes as far as that goes. It'll still be 3 and up.
Right.
Okay.
Now we
K2.
will continue to do writing assessments across all grade levels as well, and those will all be electronic.
Okay. Wow.
One other thing that happens that's terrific about that is that we wait months right now for the results of assessment, and sometimes that makes it tough in terms of instructional decisions and placements and all of those kinds of things. Once we have the PARCC assessments in place, of course, those results will be really rapid. Almost instant.
Right.
And so we're going to be able to use those to make all kinds of decisions in a more timely way.
That is exciting. Boy, our world's changing, isn't it?
It is. It's huge.
I mean, and the world of education has changed really in the past 5 years.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm stunned that we've made that level of improvement and change as quickly as we have. Now, I do have to tell you, this is not going to be without bumps.
Oh, sure.
You know, when you move to an online testing system, you know, there are lots of things that we're still working out. I do want to make sure that anybody who hears this certainly understands that for this school year, though, for 2013-14, we're still on TCAP.
TCAP.
And so, you know, folks will be talking about that, and students will be preparing for that. So we're still on TCAP. We're
The
one
next
more
school
year
year,
out
14,
before we'll
15.
be moving to PART.
But you do, Tim, in your department, especially in the principals, all the schools are working toward that, because that is quite a drastic change in the way that we've operated. And so a lot of training has to happen. Equipment has to be put
That's
into
right.
place, and for us to be able to make all of it happen.
It is something that we really have to be very systematic about our approach to being ready, and it's not something, you know, we couldn't have decided in the summer of 2014, okay, let's get ready for next year. That couldn't have happened, and that's why it has been actually since 2011, you know, we've been working toward that full implementation. And that's something that I do think the state has done well in terms of helping us get that information out there and make that progress each summer. Besides the training that folks have been getting from the state, and we have hundreds of our WCS teachers who have gotten many hours of professional development this summer from the state. Our Teaching, Learning, and Assessment department is providing ongoing training all through the school year and even during the summer on specific aspects of not only the Common Core, but just best instructional practices. A lot of what's in Common Core is just, it's best instructional practice. Some of the folks who have been at this a long time, like I have, will look at the Common Core and say, well, of course.
Yeah.
That's what we ought to be doing for boys and girls.
Okay. So some changes, but honestly not that many, and then different terminology we need to learn.
That's right.
So different terminology, different tools, but still standards. Still
That's
standards. Okay. We have about a minute. I know we haven't covered quite everything you wanted to say, so if you can think of anything I've missed that you'd like to share.
Here's one of the most important things, and it's that if parents or folks in the community, anyone wants to know more, if those folks want to know more about the Common Core standards, they really ought to go to the source. And Tennessee has done a terrific job putting together a resource, and it's called 10 Core. And so they can go to that website, and it's www.tncore, 10core.
That's easy.
.org.
tncore.org. Okay.
It gives the latest and greatest of all the information about what the state is doing, both with PART testing and also the Common Core.
Okay.
The other thing that you can do there is you can click and actually see the Common Core standards themselves. You don't have to depend upon what someone may say to you. They believe the standards say, go ahead and look at them.
It's all right
They're
there.
right there for everyone to see. And
But
it's a really
then,
terrific resource.
For Williamson County parents, we've got that included in our scope and sequence.
And we have already incorporated it into the scope and sequence so they can look there as well.
And that's
see
just on our
what's-
website at www.wcs.edu, and then you go in under instructional
services.
services.
And then teaching, learning, and assessment, and it's right there.
And it's right there. So I would encourage, as you would, parents to go take a look as the school year gets ready to start. Go look at what your child's going to be learning in the different grade levels, and you'll see right there it's all laid out for you. You could, again, Tim, your department's done a fabulous job in working with the teachers and getting that all put together. And once again, we're out of time, but you are coming back.
I am.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tim. And thank you for joining us for Education 101.
What the? What? I should have thrown you away? Okay.